We've taken all our plants and we've bred them to be sugary and sweet, but then we've lost a whole bunch of things that we don't realize, and we've gained things that aren't good for us. You have 6, 7, 8 different lettuces if you go to Whole Foods, but they all come from the same Lactuca species, and they've just been changed into different varieties. So in the way that you could be like, oh, a Belgian Malinois and a Great Dane and a Shih Tzu and a Chihuahua, it's 4 different species. It's like, well, actually it's all one, Canis lupus familiaris. Well, all those lettuces are just one species. I'm playing the Gandalf game. I'm not doing the Joe Rogan game. Like, my long-term goal for aging is to become wizened with time. I want a big, long white beard and long white hair. I want to look like I stepped out of the Old Testament. I'm just trying to go a different route. If somebody's interested in that different route, it's looking at what supplements can keep your testosterone levels, I don't want to say elevated or high, but just in range. And for women, that might look more like looking at estrogen and progesterone, but there are plants that have traditionally been used for this. They'll never be as strong as pharmaceuticals, and you don't really want them to be because, man, stuff changes a person. I think one of the number one things a person could do to improve their health over the long term is...
Daniel, as somebody that's been involved in this health and wellness space for a long time now, you've had a lot of pivots in your health and wellness practices. What have been some of the foundational pieces over all these years that have stuck through your tried and true?
For me, I think the biggest through line has been a real commitment to living a natural life as much as is possible in what's probably the most kind of, complex and unnatural world that has ever really been lived in. But that's always been the through line for me. It's meant different things to me over the years, and I've explored that in different ways. But I think increasingly, as we head into, the artificial space that we're moving into digitally, technologically, psychologically, and even biologically, I think a commitment to nature is going to be crucial. I mean that in a lot of different ways, but right now we're on the precipice of essentially full human augmentation. And so, I think early in it was like, oh, I would like food without pesticides on it, 30 years ago. But now we're going into this place where it's like, man, I don't want a chip in my brain, or I don't want to be like addicted to a phone. And so I've always felt that the answers are not going to be found in culture, and the answers are not going to be found in human musings. They're going to be found in the natural world.
Okay, for somebody that buys into what you just said and they want to become more natural and connect more with nature, they haven't been doing that to this point. How do you recommend getting started?
Yeah, there's a lot of inroads, but for me, it kind of begins outside. I think it's really crucial that people have some kind of relationship with the outdoors. And so, I've often joked about this, but I think that the idea that we have a word outdoors is kind of funny. It's like this place that we talk about, the outdoors, like, it must mean we spend a lot of time indoors, right? For us to even have this language to use. So, I've cultivated the practice of hunting and gathering. That's been my inroad and how I've explored nature. So for me, that looks like working with plants and mushrooms and animals, and then bringing those home as food. But also resources today. I mean, just before we got on here, I was out gathering birch bark for fire making. And, I think that there's a temptation maybe to perceive the outdoors as basically like what a tennis court is to a tennis player. So it'd be like, oh, the outdoors, I go there to recreate. And that would mean like, I go there to, mountain bike, or I go there to hike, or I go there to canoe or something like that. All wonderful things, all great pursuits. The difference between that and something like hunting and gathering is that hunting and gathering is extractive use. And some people hear that and it's like, oh, it's taboo, like extract from nature. It's we've had our minds so perverted in the last few decades, and really over centuries, but really in the last few decades, that people who are extracting more from the world than's ever been extracted for any individual. Poor people in our country live better than kings lived in medieval times. I mean, sincerely, right? And, with regard to climate control, with regard to comfort, with regard to the foods that they can have access to, with regard to information they have access to. So we've had our minds so twisted. We hear extractive use and we think, oh, that's bad. And it's like, meanwhile, the amount being extracted for each of us, but it's happening in some faraway place. It's like cloistered off from what we can see. So then they see somebody gathering birch bark and they want to say, hey, man, are you sure you're not taking too much? And there's this horrifying level of irony. I mean, just absolutely grotesque level of irony. But you can't blame somebody for not seeing the irony because they've had their minds perverted over time. And so what I'm talking about is actually going out into nature and then doing something there that facilitates the furtherance of your life. So rather than every resource comes from Walmart or Whole Foods or Amazon, it actually coming out of your natural environment, something, right? So it could be that somebody just goes, I'm going to go gather raspberry leaves to make tea, or I'm going to go, gather sticks to use as kindling in my fire, or I'm going to go gather acorns for food, or pick your thing. I'm going to go gather wildflowers for a bouquet. Something where you have an interaction with the natural world that isn't just you cruising by on your kayak, your canoe, your mountain bike, in your running shoes, and nature is just this stage upon which our human drama is playing, but rather where nature's a place where you go and you actually interact as a type of animal that has a relationship to the natural world. I think that's really important. And that's starting to slip away really, really fast. Like extremely fast. And so outdoor pursuits are still taking place, but actual use of the outdoors in the way that is that other animals do is becoming almost non-existent for moderns.
As somebody who's been in this world again a long time, you've been doing this for a long time. How much of what you're using food and resource-wise are you extracting yourself? And you're somebody who's in Maine, you're in the forest, you've created your life around this. But how much of, again, the resources you're using are you collecting?
I would say a pretty small percentage overall. I mean, just look at me right now. It's like I got like this metal microphone. I'm on a computer. I'm wearing a t-shirt made who knows where, and everything, is artificial in our world. So, it's more about maintaining the connection than it is about, okay, I should say this. For me today, it's more about maintaining that connection than it is about being able to sort of have bragging rights about how much of my stuff comes from there. But I've been there before. So if you'd asked me this like 5 or 6 years ago, it would have been 100% of my meat. It would have been, 50% of my plant foods. It had been a tremendous swath of my calories. Now I make a television show for cable TV. I'm traveling constantly. I just got home from 3 weeks on the road. I don't have the almost like luxury to do it at that level. And also, I think that it's really crucial for humans to thrive. I think that's really important. And people who want to go all in on this kind of thing it means cutting off a lot of other things. And that can make it difficult to really thrive in the modern world. So I always say we live in 3 worlds. We live in a natural world, we live in a built world, and we live in a digital world. And if you can't thrive in all 3 of those spaces, you're going to really be challenged moving forward in the world. And so we all know people who are, let's say, boomers or even older, maybe like silent generation, and they just can't get with the digital space. And that's kind of okay because, they're late enough in the game that that's going to be all right. But if you're a millennial and you can't thrive in the digital space, you're going to be extremely hampered into the future. Or let's talk about the built space. Like I know people in the primitive skills foraging kind of space. that almost can't go in public. When they do, it's like in moccasins and buckskin, and they smell like the smoke of a fire, and their feet are really dirty, and like people are like, ugh, it doesn't really fit into the built environment. And so, I want to be able to like walk in all three of those spaces. But the problem for most moderns is they can't go into the natural space. And that's the saddest one, because that's the real world. The built space is what I call artifact land. We can get into that more if you want. And then, the digital space, of course, is based on all things artificial. And so, what's most important to me is that a person has the ability to go into the natural world. But as far as how much you take out of that world, ultimately, all of our resources are coming from there, right? But I think it's less about how much you do. In fact, I kind of see that as sort of toxic thinking now, personally, because what I see happens is people will use, so it's like, who's the most healthy? Who's the most vegan? Who trains the most? Who's the most this, the most that, the 100% this or that? That's all just ego flattery. I don't think that's a real healthy approach. I think the thing that's important is that we maintain a good relationship. And that relationship isn't just, nature's pretty abstract, to say like a relationship with nature is extremely vague. So actually, I would, maybe at some point we can disambiguate that a little bit, because I actually mean relationships with like lots of natural entities, be they plant, fungi, animal, and then specific places too, bodies of water, forests, mountains. So I don't just mean nature like, this kind of like broad blanket term, but I mean it like at a more individual level. So in other words, if you're gathering, Queen Anne's lace flowers for your bouquet, well, then you have this relationship happening with wild carrots, because that's what that plant is a wild carrot. And so, I think that rather than, a flower I'm picking, it's sort of like, I wouldn't want somebody to just pick someone out of my family as a random person. It's like, hey, I know that. That's a specific person. I can tell you about that person. I love this person. This person's not just a random person. Well, if Queen Anne's lace flower isn't just a flower, it's a specific species called wild carrot that humans have a deep, long relationship with. If we've cultivated into the domestic plant we call the carrot. And so rather than just picking it because it's pretty, it's kind of useful to get to know it, right? So it's kind of like, imagine a guy who's a womanizer and he doesn't actually care about the individual woman. It's just about the sex, right? Versus a man who meets a woman and actually cares about who she is and then invests into her and her into him, and they are in relationship. That's sort of the difference. So a lot of times what we have is like, we might think we're interacting with nature, but it's at such a shallow level, And so it's so important, I think. Like, it's good to go out and gather flowers, even if you don't know what they are. Don't get me wrong. I just mean there's another level of relationship, because those flowers have been living on the earth as a species longer than humans. And so they probably deserve respect, and we could even get to know them, if that makes sense. So anyway, to circle back around, percentages don't really matter to me anymore, I think. But they did when I was 20s and 30s, like I cared more about that because it was like, how hardcore can I be? But I see that as a dead end now, actually. Because if you really want to do that, you kind of end up like one of those isolated people, like on one of those Alaska shows. And it's like, whoa, okay, now you've gained all that. It's like Jesus says this interesting thing. He says, what does it benefit a man to gain the whole world but lose his soul? It's like, what's it benefit you to be so hardcore that you're 100%, you have no friends, no family, no relationships, no job, no meaningful thing to do except every day try to get enough food to live. So we're no longer in the conditions of our ancestors where 30 people living together would make this happen. It's very difficult as a single person or as a small nuclear family to go out and like survive off the wild. We don't even have access to the land base anymore, no less like have the speciation that we had then. So yeah, I'm more about somebody getting to go out on a Saturday and pick pine cones up than, being in buckskins in Alaska.
In all fairness, there are different seasons, though. And you mentioned the season in your life where you were like that. And as somebody who is leaving a lot of what they know in this modern world behind and hearing a conversation like this, and trying to form that deeper connection with the natural world, I could see there being a time where you get more invested and more absorbed into this to kind of offset where you've gotten in life to this point.
Mm-hmm.
Just riffing off of what you said there and the fact that there are different seasons and
Definitely.
this isn't something I personally had a lot of practical experience with, but I could see myself, taking a period of time where I, take efforts and energy from different areas to learn more in the natural realm about plants, about hunting, about providing for me and my family. And then get to a place where you're at, where you realize like maybe I've pushed, and this can happen in any area of life, when you learn something new, especially, and you get excited about it and you're passionate. So yeah, I just see it as being different seasons in life.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Anytime you want to build something into your life, it means saying no to a lot of other things, and I think so for somebody who wants to go really deep down this path, it'll mean setting other things aside, at least for a time, to invest in that, and because there's not a lot of societal support for it. You know what I mean? So you really are going to have to, like for me, the path has been so many things, from reading about it to experimenting to finding mentors to taking workshops to, there's a lot of facets, because we don't have like a college program where you go learn this, or there's not a high school classes on this, or there's not an easy like kind of adult education program. I mean, you have to really seek this out. So if somebody wants to go really hardcore, I'm all for it. You asked me specifically about myself, so I'm just sort of sharing where I'm at now with it. And that I've seen, it's kind of like the diet wars, I always call it. So it's like, you have the people who are doing a paleo diet, but then you have the people who are like the most hardcore. And those are the people who usually you end up finding out have been lying, are sick. It's not working for them anymore, but they've written all these books, so they keep acting like they're so hardcore. And what you end up with is sort of a diminishing return. So, if you think of law of diminishing returns, it's kind of like, I'll use this example of wine. I always use this. I think it's a really useful one. It's like, I can tell the difference between a $5 bottle of wine and a $30 bottle of wine. And I can tell the difference between a $100 bottle of wine and a $30 bottle of wine. But I can't tell the difference between a $100 bottle of wine and a $1,000 bottle of wine. I don't have the level of refined perception for that. So a sommelier will, but I don't have that. So the more I spend there, at first, the more I spend, the better it gets. But then over time, the more I spend, the less I can tell. So when you enter a pursuit like this, you might say like, man, this is great. I want to do more of this, and I'm going to invest more time in this. But there is like a diminishing return. And I think there isn't anything, because you need so many different facets of your life to be balanced. And so we have benefits in our modern life that our ancestors did not have. Like, because there's like the Maslow hierarchy of needs, for instance. So if I want to spend my whole day gathering food and building shelter, let's say, it's a very worthwhile pursuit. That's going to probably cut into my like spiritual time, my meditation time, my communication time, my relationships, all these other things that I need to thrive. And so if, having ultimate health is a pie chart, you want a slice of this dedicated to what I'm talking about. But if you try to like make the whole pie or too much of the pie, it's going to mean having to say no to a whole bunch of things that are really important to your health too, like your relationships and, connections with other people and connections with God and all those kind of things that are really, really important. And so our ancestors were spending quite a lot of time doing this stuff. They had sort of a simpler life too, but we don't have that luxury of a simple life anymore. So I think there's a balance to be had. So there are seasons for sure, but there's definitely like, most of us also want to thrive in this world. So, what I'm presenting to people now with my TV show is how to do this stuff, but also kind of, I'm just like, I get a lot of those requests from those hardcore shows. Like, hey man, do you want to be on backcountry survival or whatever? And it's like, that's not really who I am. I really want to share this for regular people. who want to continue to be regular people, but have, a more meaningful experience of life.
I mentioned the fact that you're in Maine, you're in the woods. For somebody right now who is young, excited about the potential here, and they have a whole life in front of them, but they want to get the foundation right, and they're not tethered to a certain area right now. How do you recommend somebody find that place where they can connect to what we've been talking about? Things like quality water, having nature and trees. What is it you'd look for in an environment to set a base and then to live more like we're talking about?
So, I travel to do this because I make a show about it. So I'm last week I was in the Mojave Desert, and before that I was in Savannah, Georgia, off Little Tybee Island, and before that I was in the Sonoran Desert, and everywhere I go is still Earth. And what's so cool about humans is that we spread out around the whole planet, and we've carved out niches everywhere. So it's pretty astonishing when you go to the Sonoran Desert and you think about, let's say, the Cherokee Apache, who are like somehow living on what's a pretty bleak landscape. There's no trees, there's no forest, there's no water. And they carved out a pretty incredible existence there. Or you go up to the Arctic and you think like, wow, how did the Inuit make a life here? But they did. They made houses out of snow and lived a beautiful life up there. In fact, they were considered some of the healthiest, happiest people on the planet before they got, essentially westernized. I was foraging recently in New Jersey. I think when I think of New Jersey, I don't really think about, I know it's called the Garden State, but I don't really think of it so much like that. But I don't know that it matters where you are. The city would be the most challenging place, but you meet these characters who I meet people all the time who are like these urban foragers who are making all kinds of interesting things happen, even in the city. I mean, having access to open spaces is really important, but I think it's more about the spirit that you approach it in versus like where you go, because you can do it anywhere. Even if it was, in your local city park, you could have a connection to the natural world. I mean, I think it would be hard in a prison cell maybe, but I think you could still eke it out, because it's like everywhere you go, it's still Earth. And so I'm not so into like, where people need to live or anything like that. I think we need people doing this everywhere. And what's unfortunately been lost in globalization. So it's kind of like, let's say that, if you travel, you see it, it's like every town you roll into, you're like Home Depot, Old Navy, Lowe's, like this the same. It's just every town's the same. You got these same stores and Applebee's again. And then, you go to restaurants, and unless they have a ethic about sourcing, all the food's coming from those Cisco trucks. And so what we've lost is regionality. So now everything's becoming homogenous. It's unfortunate because people love ethnic cuisine, right? It's like we all like that idea. I think most of us do. It's like, Thai food, Indian food, Mexican food, whatever it is, French food. But we're kind of getting to this place where the thing that makes regionality is being lost. That's the produce of the land itself. So it's basically terroir. It's the flavor of a place. So it's fun for me to go traveling and to see what foragers and hunters are doing where they live, because it's different than what I'm doing here where I live. So, in Maine, for instance, I'll be moose hunting this year. Well, most of the country's not going to be moose hunting because they don't have moose. But they have something else that's equally cool and interesting and, delicious and worth pursuing and getting to know. With plants, I mean, it's so true of plants. I go to places, I think it was 2 years ago, I was down in Alabama harvesting American lotus, and what an incredible food. It doesn't grow here where I live. And this is like a food you could make a life on. I mean, as versatile as wheat. It's just pretty versatile. You get the biggest civilization ever exist is built upon it. or maize, corn. I mean, look at the civilizations built on corn. It's like, you got this plant down there. I just don't have it. I'm not going to move down there to be with this plant, but I wish it grew up here. But I've got plants up here that are incredible that they don't have down there, and vice versa. So I think it's much more beautiful to learn the species where you are. I mean, unless you got a desire to leave, I don't think this lifestyle necessarily needs to push somebody somewhere else. Again, unless you want to go live in a cabin outside, and then you need to pick a place like Maine or a place like Alaska or a place like the Blue Ridge Mountains or something like that. But I think for most people, right where you live, that's kind of like, there's a lot of wisdom in the movie, in the book, The Wizard of Oz. And, Dorothy at the end, she's like, oh, all along it was right here in my own backyard. She had to go on that journey first to understand the value of what she already had. I know people who move constantly. They're chasing, man. It's always chasing. Like if somebody has meditation in their life and prayer in their life, it creates kind of like a ability to just be in a place, and to experience peace and stillness. I know most of my life has been dominated by almost being like my body being like 2 or 3 steps ahead of my soul, just running, everywhere, like not slowing down enough to really appreciate. So if you want to forage well, you probably need that ability to slow down and smell the flowers. You know what I mean? Like that, we have that saying, and it's like, well, there's wisdom in it. So a lot of times people are constantly, no matter where they go, they think they need to move. I just know so many people like that. And I think settling in somewhere is the best way to really learn. I say that I have this incredible luxury of work that takes me to forage and hunt all over the place. But I make 10 episodes of my show a year, and I make about half of them, I'd say a third to a half of them right here. It's really important to me that I continue to develop my local knowledge. Like I plan probably to stay in Maine for my whole life, and to die here. So I want to keep learning this place. Now, when I go other places, it's fun, man. I love that. I love that experience. I love to see all that different culture. I like to see what people are doing in different places and then take that back with me. So like Dorothy takes that experience of Oz back home, but then she anchors in at home. And I think it's something like that. So we all need basically like there's a handful of things we really need to thrive, right? We need good food, clean water, clean air, and access to sunlight. Those are really, really important. But you can find most of those things in most places.
As you share there at the end, you've targeted what I was going to get to. The fact that there are these foundational things that maybe in Maine you have them, but I'm thinking of things like clean water from a spring that you can harvest and drink that water and harvest it for you and your family. Clean air, having a direct connection with getting out in nature without having to get in a car and drive for 30 minutes. Community, certain areas can be more isolating, or if you're in certain cities, you may not have as open-minded thinking people that are thinking along the lines of what we're sharing here, where you can connect with them in person and riff and think of new things. And so I agree with what you're saying as a whole, but I also think that we'll take spring water for an example. When I think of you, that's one of the pillars. Daniel Vitalis, findaspring.com, you created that website. So let's go to the water piece. Is that something you still prize and harvest?
Not as much as I did in the past, though I think it's still wonderful. I love to drink from springs and wells as well. But everywhere you go has pluses and minuses. So like, for instance, I was in New York City recently. The food in New York City is some of the best food in the world. If you want farm fresh, organic, and biodynamic ingredients, it's actually much easier in the city. So if you came here to Maine, most of your restaurants here have red hot dogs. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with that's a Maine thing, but our hot dogs are red. We don't have all of that incredible food here. but you find it in the cities. It's interesting because you go into the cities and you have a harder time finding the clean air and getting the sunlight, right? But you got great food. You come out to rural Maine where I live, you don't have community. It's an hour to get to anyone's house. And most of the people around here do not think how I think. So lest anyone kind of, imagine some kind of utopia, it's challenging to live in a place like this from the community perspective. So community, not so much. Clean water, yeah, we have that. We have air. Food, you can put it together here, but it's not. Again, New York City, LA. I was in LA recently. Man, you want to find like a farm fresh meal, organic, like where like they take it to a level that's almost like obnoxious to me, right? Where it's like the old Portlandia joke where it's like they're serving the chicken and it's like, well, what was the chicken's name? And they like tell, you know what I mean? Like that level of almost pretentious, ridiculous organic food. I don't have that here. So I just think wherever you go, for me personally, if you're asking me personally, my rule is I want to be able to walk outside of my front door naked. And I can do that here. I can, for the price of a small apartment in New York, you can rent a massive pine palace out here in Maine. So huge benefits. But if I was in New York, I would have more community. I would have access constantly to whatever food I wanted. It's give or take. Places I really like though. One of the things I love about Maine is I consider it like the, it's like the northeastern corner of the room. And that means I can position myself with my back to the corner, looking out at the whole restaurant floor, essentially, of the United States. And all that's behind me is just the Canadian wilderness, and the boreal forest. And I like that. Like, I'm not a big fan of the feeling of north, south, east, and west of me are cities and just, hordes of hungry people if things went south or whatever. I like the ruralness. But I've watched so many people move here to homestead or create like their ideal life and just, they don't last here because the isolation's too much for a lot of people. So I don't know. I go out to the Sonoran Desert. I've got a lot of friends out there. I love that area. I mean, I go out there, I feel immediately spiritualized by the landscape. It's incredible. I just walking through that landscape, I feel immediately connected to something more sublime. I have a lot of community out there. I know a lot of people. Air's good. No water. Nothing to drink there. You die on that landscape if you forget to bring a water bottle. So, I just don't know that there's somewhere ideal. I think the hardest place for someone like me to live would be in a city without transportation. But I know lots of people who live in the city who it's a short drive out of the city and a half an hour they're out in the countryside. So, yeah, it just depends, I guess, what you want. But one thing I have learned is there's no utopia. When I was younger, I was chasing that. I remember I was like 18 and I thought I would go to Florida. And I thought I would maybe find like some woods where I could pitch a tent and there would be like fruit growing everywhere because I was like, it's tropical. And then you get down there, you're like, oh, no, okay. That was really naive. I then was like, all right, Hawaii. So then I went to Hawaii and I tried to do it there. And I just got my ass kicked, by all the private land ownership, by the intense moisture, by the biting insects, by the, I thought I would like go carve out some utopian life somewhere. Over time, now that I've been kind of all over the world, it's like there's some places that are pretty optimal, but like there's really no utopia anywhere. And I think that the people who most think there's going to be a utopia are the people who are most disconnected from the natural world. And so when I was younger, I was very disconnected from it. And so I had ideas about what nature would be like that weren't based on reality. They were based on, I don't know, movies and TV shows and cartoons and fairy tales and all these kind of things. And then when I actually went out there, it's like, most of us think the ideal place is like a tropical environment, but you get down to the tropics and man, it's not easy living at all. Not at all. The beach is nice. Inland's like impenetrable and the humidity is oppressive and you're battling with venomous creatures. And, some people might think, oh, well, geez, I mean, Maine, you got like 6 months of winter. And it's like, it's really hard to be in the snow and the dark and the cold and no leaves for half the year, but there's benefits to that too, man. It kills off all the biting insects. It dries the air out. It shakes out the weak people, all those kind of things. So it's give or take. I think a big part of it's like what your body's acclimated to and what you love, but you're not going to find it all anywhere. So I think it's more important what's your inner state like than necessarily just your outer state.
Let's come back to the spring water piece. Are you collecting spring water at this time? And it sounds like it's not as much of a priority as it was in the past. Talk about your current thinking.
Yeah, well, I basically have to pick like what I'm going to focus on. So gathering spring water was a practice I did for decades. So I would take big glass bottles and go to springs around the country. Like I don't own that website, findaspring.com anymore, but I started it years ago. And that was like a major connection point for me to the natural world, was connecting with natural water. Later on, when I decided that I would focus on hunting and gathering, I sort of had to pick like, well, what, I could do it all, but again, it would mean cutting off other things that are important to me as well. So now I think that's something I still do, but it's not a major focus anymore. I'm very happy with the water that comes out of my well here at home. But if I wasn't hunting for meat and foraging for plants and doing all those things, I think I would be more focused on that. So I know people that's their major relationship with the natural world is through water, which is like a great way to do it. And I know a lot of people that don't have the stomach to hunt or fish or don't have the interest or passion for it, or similarly with foraging. It's just, there's some people who are like, man, that's just not for me, So spring water is this great way to like essentially forage something that you're built out of. You're obviously built out of tremendous amount of water. And so the quality of that water, I think, really matters. It sounds like you do too. So a lot of people, sort of focus on being made out of food, but it's like, well, you're way more water, and what's the quality of it? That really matters. But yeah, I think it's that's just a great way to forage without having to learn botany or mycology or eschatology or memology or any of those kind of things.
So you're hunting, you're foraging, you're fishing, which is under that umbrella of hunting. How do you navigate balancing that out with foods you're getting at, say, local farms, the grocery store?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty effortless to balance because it's kind of like, well, I'm cooking venison tonight, let's say, but I'm cooking vegetables from my local farm. It's pretty seamless. All those foods go really great together. I mean, ultimately, all the foods that I eat that don't come from nature are species that one point came from nature. So, I mean, they all kind of go together really well. I just, I have knowledge of the origins of a lot of these foods. So if I get something from the farm, I know things about it that the other people at the table don't know, historically, like what the species is, where it comes from in the world, what its backstory is. Because it's an interest of mine and a passion of mine. But I don't have any issue integrating them. It's all food.
But for you do prioritize the wild food, correct?
Yeah, I do.
Let's talk about that. For a lot of people, food is just food. As somebody who is out in the bush hunting and foraging, talk about how the food landscape of what somebody's going to see in a grocery store differs from the actual origin of these foods.
Yeah, well, they differ in the process of domestication. And so the process of domestication turns something wild-born into something that's more appropriate for the house or a household or a farm or maybe a homestead. So domestication in Latin means of the house. And we think like, our home is called a domicile. So, hence domestication. So we take species, the dog's probably our easiest example. And we turn a gray wolf, which is what all of our dogs come from, and we turn it into 500 breeds of modern dogs. And so we look out at those dogs and see all this beautiful variety and incredible variation, right? I mean, it's pretty astonishing to see how different dogs can look from one another. My dog's like are Plot hounds. They got brindle coat, long, goofy, long ears, a byproduct of them being bred for their noses. But, something that came with those traits were those ears that are just goofy long and not real, not ultimately probably that useful. Very, very short hair. If you put one of my dogs against a gray wolf, I mean, you would just not think they could be the same species. You maybe see they're related, but you wouldn't think, oh, that Plot hound is a gray wolf. And I think it gets more extreme when we get down to, let's say, the lap dogs. So any of those kind of really small dogs, it's hard to see a wolf in there. And I think probably similarly when we get up into the extremes of the bigger dogs too. So let's say like a Irish wolfhound or something. You're like, man, I don't know. It's like a gigantic poodle, 6 feet tall or whatever. Hard to see that that's a wolf. But when you get into some of those middle varieties of dogs, like a Alaskan Malinois, or sorry, Belgian Malinois, or Alaskan Malamute, or a German Shepherd, or any of those sled dogs, Huskies, they look like wolves. You can see it. Well, all dogs come from wolves. There isn't any dogs that we have that are coyotes or foxes. They're all wolves. Well, similarly, when we go to the supermarket, everything that we're eating has a wild progenitor species. So the wolf is the wild progenitor of the dog. Similarly, all of our, like I mentioned before, Queen Anne's lace, very common roadside wild plant, is the wild progenitor of the carrot. Now, if you pull one up, it's got a taproot the size of your pinky, smells like a carrot. The color is pale, almost like cream colored. It's very fibrous. There's no biting off a carrot. It's not high in sucrose the way a carrot is. But you can sort of tell in the way you can tell a Chihuahua ultimately did come from a wolf. You can sort of be like, all right, I see that a carrot came out of this. But the carrot is not a naturally occurring organism, nor is the lettuce, nor is the broccoli, nor is the beet, nor is the cucumber. In fact, when we go to the supermarket, almost nothing in there actually comes from the wild world without first having been altered by people into its domestic form. Doesn't mean it's bad. It's just something to learn about because it gives you a greater appreciation and an understanding of biology. So if we were going to the supermarket produce section together, we could kind of group off all the stuff that's in there, and you'd see really quickly there's really very little variety. So it can be confusing to people because they think that they're getting a lot of variety when they buy things that look different from each other in the supermarket, not necessarily realizing. So, you have 6, 7, 8 different lettuces if you go to a Whole Foods, but they all come from the same Lactuca species, and they've just been changed into different varieties. So in the way that you could be like, oh, a Belgian Malinois and a Great Dane and a Shih Tzu and a Chihuahua, it's 4 different species. It's like, well, actually it's all one, Canis lupus familiaris. Well, all those lettuces are just one species. So, you could think you were eating different plants if you ate beets and you ate Swiss chard, and you might not realize that those are the same plant. Or you could have turnips and canola oil and not realize like, oh, it's one plant. Or you could have broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, kale, kohlrabi, even cabbages. They're all one species. So it looks like a lot of stuff. And then you have like families too, like the nightshades. We have quite a few of them in our food supply. So it'd be like potato, tomato, eggplant. These are all in the same family group. And so there's very little in the supermarket compared to what you'd eat out in the wild. So there's a sort of general ideas like a hunter-gatherer eats 1,000 to 2,000 species, individual unique species a year, whereas an American eats like 30 species a year. So incredible truncation of varieties taking place because we focus in on those domestic varieties. Now, when we domesticate something, what we tend to do is a few things. Domestication's got this characteristic called neoteny, and neoteny means that the adult form continues to carry on the juvenile characteristics. So if you have a dog, it's a great way to think about it. Think about how a wolf puppy looks. And if you're not familiar, it's worth looking up because a wolf puppy is cute. A wolf pup's cute. Curly tail, floppy ears, goofy, rolls around, playing all day. Hard to tell the difference between that and what we'd think of as a puppy. But when it matures, you got a whole different creature on your hands now. You got an animal you can't keep in the house. You got a ravenous wolf, a pretty dangerous animal, a very self-deterministic animal. It no longer has floppy ears. It no longer has a curly tail. It's no longer playful. It sheds the juvenile characteristics in favor of the adult characteristics. But when we breed a dog, what we do is we carry forward those juvenile characteristics. I think there's a lot of science for this, but let me kind of give a non-scientific but kind of general way to think about it. When you domesticate something, you take total control over its needs, essentially. When you do that, a thing can give up all of its defenses. So if I say to the dog, hey, look, the wolf, you don't need to hunt anymore. I've got kibble for you. I'll bathe you. You don't need to run with the pack anymore. I'm your pack now. You don't need to worry about the cold anymore. You've got all that thick double-coated fur. Like, hey man, it's going to be warm in the house. And it can slowly give all that up until you have this adult dog that still has a curly tail, floppy ears, short hair, acts goofy like a puppy, but it's an adult. Like think of maybe like a golden retriever. It's a kind of a good example. It's got the characteristics of a wolf pup, but it's an adult now. Well, that's kind of what we're doing also with plants. And so when we domesticate a plant, one of the things we want to do is make it meristematic for longer. So meristem means when a young shoot first comes out of the ground or a new shoot grows off a plant, it's very soft, and we call that meristematic, and you can eat that, but that's food. But I don't know if you've ever experienced this. You might have experienced it like if you get bad meal at a restaurant or something, or you get some old asparagus, something like that, where you're chewing and you get a bit that you're like, that's not food. It's like fiber. It's turned to plant.
Yeah.
It's gone from being meristematic and soft to being like, you just know it's not food anymore. I want people to know as a forager, I'm eating good food. I'm not eating like sticks and twigs that are like, there's some incredible food in the wild world. I really encourage people to check out WildFed and see some of the food we're eating. But when a plant matures, it becomes fibrous. Another thing that will happen, so we're trying to breed for that softness in a big vegetable. Because typically in a wild plant, by the time it gets big, it's all fiber. You got to eat it when it's young and tender and it's a shoot still. Another thing is as the season progresses, so here in Maine, when plants first come up in the spring, it's been so cold that the insects haven't really gotten going yet. And so our spring shoots are usually pretty edible with low levels of bitterness. But once the insects start coming out, herbivorous predation starts happening. So these insects are herbivores. They start eating plants. Well, plants start to do what they do, which is produce chemicals that ward off herbivorous predation. So they become bad tasting. And they become bad tasting so that they'll be eaten less, right? So what we do is we breed out that bad tastingness, and we produce plants that get big but still taste mild. This is a really important thing for your audience to understand. This is why it's so hard to grow food. When you want to grow food organically, you realize, oh man, like everything's coming out of the wood line here to eat my whatever it is you're growing. And you're at first, it's like, well, why would they spray poison on food? Like, what's with pesticides? It's like, again, we were raised, our minds were perverted from childhood. So we were raised with a utopian idea of what nature would be like, right? And so we have this idea like, oh, we should just be able to like live in nature. Well, yeah, except that none of these foods are from nature. And so what happens is when you grow them and they have none of those toxic, bad tasting chemicals, the deer eat them, the insects eat them, everything's like picking away at your produce. So you got to like fence it, protect it. So that's what I was saying before. We take in domestication control of the defenses for an organism, right? So it doesn't need to. So we say, hey, we'll keep other things from feeding on you if you stop producing those chemicals. That's the deal that we make with a plant. So whereas a wild lettuce out of the ground, when it's a young shoot, is a delicious little edible. Or when the plant grows up, the very top inflorescence, when it's young and meristematic, you can break that off and it's like a big, nice tasting vegetable. A little bitterness, like a green leaf lettuce or something, but very edible. You throw it right in a salad. As soon as that thing starts to mature, it tastes terrible and it exudes so much white latex. It's not food anymore. Well, it's doing that to protect itself. Well, what have we done with our lettuces is we've got them to stop doing that by protecting them for them. So we keep the aphids off and we keep the ants off and we keep the deer off. And so it becomes a good tasting vegetable, but its problem is it can't survive on its own like that. So I always joke, hey, why doesn't your lettuce escape your garden and take over your lawn? Well, it just can't. It needs so much individual care that without people, it can't survive because everything's just going to come eat it. It has no defenses. It has no protective chemical bad tastingness anymore. Or the dog loses all of its like aggressiveness in the domestication process. So we've taken all our plants and we've bred them to be sugary and sweet and soft and gentle and easy to digest. But then we've lost a whole bunch of things that we don't realize, and we've gained things that aren't good for us. So now we're learning, oh, well, like all that sugar, it's like probably not really that good for us, right? Fructose is a fairly natural sugar. Fructose is a simple, monosaccharide, but too much of it is not good for you. That was never a problem because you would have a hard time in nature accessing a lot of it. So if we go out foraging right now, it's blackberry season here in Maine. We just got through right at the tail end of blueberries. Blueberries, wild ones, not crazy sweet. And their peak sweetness only lasts a couple of days. So the days leading up to that, I'm eating blueberries and they're good. I like them, but they still got a lot of acidity. They're not quite there yet. And then there's like a week where you're like, man, they're really sweet. And then right now, there's still some blueberries on the landscape. They don't taste great. And then right now, we're in not great tasting blackberries, but in the next few days, they're going to get real good. And then that's going to do the same thing. They're going to lose that sugariness. There's only a short moment where there's like peak sugar going on. So human beings were built with this inborn desire to seek this sweet flavor. We love it. That's great because it's like finding a needle in a haystack in the natural world. There's so little of it that you expend a tremendous amount of sugar in the pursuit of sugar. What we have now is we've domesticated all these plants to have so much sugar, but we don't have to do any work really to get to them. And now we can over-sugar ourselves to the point of diabetes. We've done this kind of thing. It goes on because we want everything to be meristematic. So what does that mean? Well, we've bred it to be lower in fiber. And so turns out fiber is more than just helping you poop well. Fiber is the substrate for your whole microbiome in your gut. And if you don't have those fibers because you're eating plants that are basically like baby food, well, then it's going to be a struggle to get your fiber needs met. So what do you have? You have old people having to take fiber supplements because the food supply lacks fiber. You have people having to take insulin because the food supply has too much sugar. So we've gotten so good at this breeding that we've turned all of these things bad for us in the process, or potentially harmful to us if we overindulge in them. Again, I think they all have a place, but it's like you got to really, it's helpful to understand this stuff. So yeah, we've changed most of our foods in really dramatic ways. Less so with our animals. Animal domestication doesn't have those same kind of effects, but our plants have been tremendously changed. And then I think probably the one other thing that's really important to remember is that before, when I was talking about those bad tasting flavors, the bitterness of wild plants, those are medicinal compounds almost always, even the ones that are toxic to us. So you have a plant that comes to mind, very sort of famous example would be foxglove from Europe, which is the genus Digitalis. And Digitalis is a extremely lethal cardiac toxin. So, it'll kill you. but it's also used as a medicine in extremely small amounts. And sometimes the thing that's a poison in a really small amount is medicine. I mean, that's the whole essence of pharmacology. So everybody knows most pharmaceuticals, if you overtake them, will kill you or harm you significantly. Some will maybe just poison your liver or poison your kidneys or something like that. But in small amounts, they have a therapeutic effect. Well, all those pharmaceutical drugs are essentially 75% of them are derived from plant chemicals. We call the places that make chemicals chemical plants, but we forget that plants are chemical plants too. That's where we get the whole idea. And when you breed all of those out, you end up with a food supply that lacks medicine, because medicine is the flavor we've been trying to get rid of. I mean, there's a reason they sugarcoat capsules of medicines, because medicine tastes bitter. So when we breed all that medicine out, we do end up having, so in the way that I said, if you breed the fiber out, you're going to have to take fiber supplements. If you overbreed the sugar in, you're probably going to end up on insulin or having to modulate your sugar somehow. Well, if you breed all the medicine out, what do you end up with? A medicine deficiency. And human beings have evolved in an environment where there's all of these phytochemicals that are medicines. And so we end up now beholden to pharmaceutical companies who produce medicines, so-called, that usually derive in some way from plants, that they then sell back to us at massive profit, but also in doses that are too severe, that have dramatic effects, but actually tend to poison us too. And so if we had food that had medicine in it, and that's one of those crazy ironies of like, let food be thy medicine. You go to the supermarket, you're like, it's hard to let food be your medicine. It's not really in those foods. So one approach that you see that's really common is like somebody does a very natural organic diet and they practice herbalism as a form of medicine, because the foods, even though they're beautiful and organically grown, they lack the medicine. So they're using herbalism is wild plants, essentially. You're using wild plants to get medicine back in your diet because it's not in those foods. So it's not as simple as like, oh, I'll let food be my medicine. I'll just eat organic produce. It's like, well, that produce is as natural as a chihuahua. You put the chihuahua out on the landscape, it's going to get eaten in a week. If it lasts a week, you put your lettuce or your eggplant or whatever it is out in the woods or out in the field somewhere, like it's gone. It can't survive on its own. And so, that's, I guess, the essence of domestication. So when you go to the supermarket, to come back around to the beginning of your question, you go to the supermarket, you're looking at like, it's more like a dog park than it is like a forest when it comes to what's available there.
All right, that was a great overview. And it sounds like there's a couple of different solutions to what you just stated, either foraging and bringing some of these medicinal plants in to balance out what you're getting at the supermarket, or purchasing herbs that still have that potency.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're foraging them.
But go more into the practical, given what you just stated, and a lot of people are still going to be, at least temporarily, buying a lot of their food at the supermarket, knowing now what they know from you. What does that look like in a practical sense to balance that out? It sounds like the stuff we're buying at the store isn't toxic. It's actually the opposite, because we've bred a lot of that medicine out of it. But how do we build that back up and create balance within the body?
Well, it can be really simple. Yeah. And I just want to kind of, I appreciate what you just said. Outside of the excess sugar, it's typically non-toxic. In fact, a lot of the plants that we're now eating are toxic in their wild form. So, I mean, that's kind of fascinating too. But so I think that can be as simple as somebody drinks herbal tea, right? And that tea that they select is based on their particular temperament, their body's needs, whatever they need medicinally. So it's like, oh, if you know your issues blood pressure, or your issues blood sugar, or your issues, pick your poison kidney issues or whatever your thing is, maybe you go, hey, I'm going to start doing herbal teas, but I'm going to select herbs that are known to be good for my particular thing. So in other words, I don't think it's enough to be like, well, I'll just have chamomile tea. It's like, chamomile's great and it tastes delicious, but I mean, it doesn't pack a lot of medicinal punch, So maybe it's about selecting herbs that have more potent effects. I really love a blend of dandelion root and burdock root, dandelion leaf, stinging nettle leaf. I like those mixed together. Yellow dock's a nice one to add a little bit into that tea. Now you've got this potent liver, kidney cleansing kind of a thing that tastes really good and can be drank regularly. I really like to make teas out of medicinal mushrooms, so chaga and reishi are a couple of my favorites. My company Surthrival, we've sold those herbs forever because they're just so beneficial to people for immunity and for as adaptogens. And so I think something like that regularly worked into your diet's really important. And then, that combined with clean eating is a really good approach, because clean eating just on its own, like we said, it's just too clean actually. And what you need is, it's strange, but it's like a little bit of something bad is what's good. So it's a little bit of poison in the form of these phytochemicals that would be poisonous if you took large amounts. That little bit stimulates, it's called hormesis, stimulates a healing response in the same way that a little bit of musculoskeletal damage from weight training creates a great adaptation that we want. So it's like, I would like my muscles to be bigger. What do I got to do to do that? Oh, I got to actually damage them a little bit to get them there. Well, it's like, I want something that's, going to help purge my liver. What do I need? Well, something that your liver's like, oh, too much of that would be bad. So it kind of works like that. So I think, yeah, a tea is a great way to do that. I think also, looking at heirloom varieties of our vegetables is a smart idea. So I think the starting point for a lot of people is going to be what's at my local supermarket. Or if you live rural like me, it's like, well, I got to drive an hour and 10 minutes to a Whole Foods. But we have farmers markets here, which is great. So I can connect in that way. But at my supermarket, it's not going to be that easy. So maybe it's like, okay, from my supermarkets where I start, I'm going to get the best food I can there. But then, maybe it's like go to your farmer's market and you start looking for varieties that you've never seen before of fruits and vegetables. And you're like, ooh, that's an interesting take on it, because we used to have a lot more variety as well. And so you'll get more phytochemistry that way. I think looking for brighter colors in your fruits and vegetables, really, really smart. Purples, reds, yellows. Probably the hardest to find, blue. Blue is very difficult to find in the natural world, and blue is very good for you. It sounds funny, but blue is good for you. So that's one of those ways as well. And, just to bring it around to animals, the major thing that happens with animals that we eat that are domesticated, like I said, domestication doesn't change the composition of our animals dramatically. What does is what they eat. Of course, most of your audience probably already knows this, but largely our domestic animals lack in omega-3s. So that's one of the challenges with them, is they'll be low in alpha-linolenic acid. And so when they're eating their natural diet, typically, foraging, if it's chickens, they need to be able to eat insects. If it's cows, they need to be able to eat grass. They need to have natural forage. So if they're just being fed grain, grains are just notoriously rich in omega-6, also an essential fat. Omega-6 got such a bad rap right now. It's like, hey man, you kind of need a bunch of omega-6 actually. It just needs to be balanced with omega-3, right? Those are those fish oils, the omega-3s. The omega-6s are those seed oils. And when you feed grains to animals, you're going to accumulate mostly omega-6s, and they're going to be low in omega-3s. But if they can get out on fresh growing green grass, there's a lot of omega-3, they'll bioaccumulate that, or chickens will get that from insects. So you want animals raised on as natural a diet as you can get, or as close to their natural diet as you can get. And you want plants grown as close to wild with genetics that are as close to wild as you can get. So if you go into a supermarket and they've got cotton candy grapes. I don't know if have you ever had those?
I've seen them. I don't think I've had them.
They taste like cotton candy. The amount of sugar is crazy, and there's no seeds, of course. So you've got a non-fertile, hybridized fruit that's exceptionally high in sugar. But maybe they got a black grape with a seed in it. And that grape's not as sweet. And it's such a pain. There's a seed in there, right? That's the one you want. It's closer to the natural form. The sugar's lower, the colors are cranked up darker, and it's still fertile and contains a seed. So that would be the equivalent of getting the pastured chicken instead of the factory farmed chicken, if that kind of analogy makes sense.
All right. So what I'm hearing from you here is we got to take a really holistic approach. And because our food has changed due to domestication, we either need to go to nature and bring some of those wild foods back in, or get them at the supermarket in a more supplemental form to have that accenting this domesticated diet.
Yeah, realistically, that's second approach is more functional for most people. I'm not just say that as somebody who I live this lifestyle, and I know it's not easy for people to be like, I'm going to functionally add foraged foods into my diet. I teach people to do that. That's my life. That's my work. I know people can do it, but if I'm in front of 100 people, how many of those people are really going to pick that up as their lifestyle? So for most people, it's going to be through herbalism. But even herbalism, I mean, it almost sounds like I'm saying, again, for the average person, that's like being like, oh, you need to start doing alchemy. You're going to make the philosopher's stone. It's like, that's so arcane sounding. Herbalism? Are you serious? Like, do I got to do it on a full moon? Like, what are we talking about? So that's why I say herbal teas. I don't mean like celestial seasoning. I mean, maybe you want to go to a company like a good supplement company, or a company like Mountain Rose Herbs or something like that, who specializes in these plants. And you could start with simple blends, so you don't have to think this out too much. It's like, oh, Mountain Rose Herbs has a liver toxin blend. Oh, great, cool. I'll order that, and I'll just brew that, and I'll start there. And I'm sure you've heard me say this if you know my work at all. I think one of the number one things a person could do to improve their health over the long term is develop an appreciation for vegetal and bitter flavors. So think about, that crazy looking sort of purple red plant that you get at the supermarket called endive. It's like, man, that's some bitter stuff. Most people, it's like, if it's on their plate in their salad, they'll act like it's a garnish and kind of shuffle it to the edge of the plate, But that's the kind of thing that's really beneficial for us to develop an appreciation for. There's science on this, that if you don't get exposed to bitter flavors as a young person, you're less likely to like them as an adult. And so most of us, again, we've had our minds perverted, intentionally perverted from childhood and before that. So we were raised around, how old are you, Jesse?
I'm 43.
Cool. I'm 40, I'll be 47 this year. So we kind of have similar era. You remember growing up, like every cartoon, every kid show, every sitcom, the kids are always like, I don't want vegetables. I hate broccoli. I hate green stuff. Like, I actually didn't. I liked savory food as a kid, but I thought I was supposed to hate it because I had always heard, oh, kids hate this stuff. You have to force them to eat it. You know what I mean? That mentality where it's almost like we were raised to embrace processed foods. And then once you get really onto processed foods, they're very addictive. And they're not just addictive in the way that like cocaine is addictive. They're addictive because they're extremely fast and simple. And so, when you're really hungry and it's like, man, I could just crack that box or package open, or I could like go in the kitchen and go through this whole process of cooking. It's like, it can be very addictive to just reach for the salty, crunchy thing, So I guess to bring it around, it's like, this needs to be simple because people are already addicted. It needs to be, you need to overcome the olfactory and gustatory challenges. And so I'm sure you've seen this too. I know I have people in my life who just have never liked to exercise. I feel so grateful. I was a pretty overweight I look back now at what overweight was when 40 years ago was different. I was overweight, but if you saw me today, you wouldn't think I was overweight at all. But like back then I would be called the fat kid. And now you're like, that's like a normal kid. Jeez, I'm not fat at all. But boy, have our standards shifted significantly. So I'm thankful that around age 16, I got into exercising and I just took to it. I like it. I like to exercise. I like to lift weights. I like to do cardio. I enjoy it. But I'm sure you know people that hate it, just hate it. And they can't imagine ever liking it. If you're in that camp, I'm sorry, it's going to be a really hard aging process because without cardiovascular exercise and strength training, you're set up for a really bad aging process. So if you don't like exercising, you have to make yourself like it. You have to learn how to make yourself like it. I mean, there's not like any other answer. I mean, Ozempic and testosterone, I guess, might help a little, but not that much, and it's not good for you. So you got to learn to love it. Similarly, you got to learn to love bitter flavors. You just got to make yourself like it. You have to use all of the dog training tricks that have been used against you. So, operant conditioning, which is essentially animal training, is and has been used on us since before you were born. And it's being used on you every single day. So basically what that is a system of punishment and reward. And you need to learn how to essentially train yourself using those exact things on yourself. So for instance, maybe you do a thing where you come up with some reward for eating something you don't like. And you go like, okay, I'm going to do this and I'm going to give myself this reward, whatever that reward is. When you think about rewarding a dog, in the beginning, it's like, I want the dog to sit, I give the dog a treat. But over time, the quality of that treat can go down, right? I don't have to give them the high-end, liver treat anymore. I can start to give them something cheaper. And then eventually a little pet on the head is enough. And then eventually they just do the sitting behavior for you. So in the beginning, you might need a way of associating the bitter flavor with something rewarding and positive. But over time, you'll come to feel the positive benefits of that in such a way that you'll actually crave it. So I just watched somebody who's very close to me go from hating exercise their whole life to buying a home gym and falling in love with training. It's been awesome to watch. But it took some work for that person, and they needed to see some results before they fell in love with it. Once they started, you start to see results, you're like, oh, boy, I kind of like this. Well, you start to eat better, you start to feel results, you're going to want that. But, so anyway, to come back around, you got to learn how to enjoy an herbal tea that doesn't taste like chocolate milk, or it doesn't taste like, something my wife's always complaining about right now. I shouldn't say complaining, but something my wife's always on about is how all these products now say no sugar. And then when you taste them, they're 40 or 50 times the sweetness because they're using either, artificial sweeteners, sucralose, or in our space, monk fruit and stevia in such insane doses that when you look at it, you think, because she doesn't like things that are sweet. So she'll look at a beverage, let's say, and be like, oh, cool, that one looks like it's not going to be sweet. And then it's like sickly sweet, right? Cloyingly sweet, but no sugar in it. That kind of stuff has a tremendous impact on our palate, our ability to taste, our ability to recognize flavor and subtlety. So maybe in the way that you think reducing, give you an example. I use my iPhone in black and white. Sometimes somebody sends me a photo, or if I'm using my navigation, I need to switch it to color because it's really hard to navigate without the blue line. You can't tell what road you're supposed to be on. If I put my phone on color, I've got a little shortcut for it, and I see the apps, they all look like Jolly Rancher candies. They are so enticing, blues and greens and reds and all these colors, and it's ultra stimulating. I had a friend who went to prison just before cannabis got legalized. He went to prison for cannabis, and he was there for several years. And when he got out, first place he went, his family picked him up and they brought him to a convenience store just on the drive home. They stopped to get gas and some snacks or something. And he was like, I couldn't believe, he was like, when I walked into the convenience store and I saw the candy aisle, I hadn't seen colors like that, he said, for years. And it was so stimulating. He was like, it was almost like a psychedelic vision, the brightness and the enticingness and how stimulating it was to his mind, right? That's how our phones are. So stimulating to our minds that when we try to just have conversations now or do regular things, it's difficult because we're used to operating in a hyper-stimulated state. And so we miss all this subtlety. We're becoming blunted in our ability. So it's like somebody who, anyway, so my point is, when you've had sucralose and stevia and monk fruit just mainlining all the time, it affects how you experience food. And a lot of people need a detox, in a sense, to reestablish taste parameters in the way that people could use that from their phone, if that's a good enough analogy. It's almost no difference if you're in the health food space or you're in the regular junk food space. The flavors are all the same. They're all using the same stuff. I've been in the supplement industry for a really long time now. I'm getting close to 2 decades that I've had Surthrival, my supplement company. And that is not a space full of healthy food. I mean, we do our thing really differently, but most supplement companies and most nutrition companies and organic food companies, they're just pumping the junk food to you, right? It might be the organically grown version of it, but they're not doing you a lot of favors. And so if we went into the health food section of a supermarket, or we went to Whole Foods and we bought some like organic snacks, they might have no sugar, but they are going to be loaded with sweetness. And that's going to make it real hard to enjoy a salad of, simple, slightly bitter vegetables. So those things don't really go hand in hand. You know what I mean? You kind of got to it's like, come out of her, my people. That's like what you have to do. Sort of start to draw yourself out a little bit from everything the world is feeding you, even when they label it organic or healthy or it's for sale in Whole Foods.
All right, so we want to bring in the herbs, either through tinctures, teas. We want the bitter foods. We got to be careful with the sugars. When we get the diet locked in, at least to a point, nobody's perfect.
You don't want to be.
You've talked about your
Jesse, right? Like I lived this. I appreciate your admonition from earlier, because earlier you were saying, hey, well, you're in a season of your life. And I've been thinking about that as we've been talking. It's true. I've had very hardcore phases, very hardcore. I can say that because I know I went further than most people will go. There's people who've gone even further, no question. I'm not trying to brag about it. I think it was stupid in retrospect. But I lived a fruitarian lifestyle for years. That means I didn't eat oils. I didn't eat salts. I didn't eat anything but nuts, seeds, and fruit. I didn't eat vegetables for years. I lived on fruit primarily. That's not a good thing to do, by the way. But I've been very, very hardcore. Where I'm at now, I just think it's important to live and enjoy life. And I don't think locking it down completely is the answer. It's so isolating, and it's fun to enjoy life a little bit. And I think that's important. So I say that with somebody with like 30 years of experience doing this stuff now. At 31, you can't believe it. 31 years ago, I started on this path. And what I have found is that 80% is, I think, better than 100%. That's just a personal thing. I know that's not for everybody, or maybe it's the season that I'm in. But the people who go 100% are not that fun to be around. And they tend to prioritize themselves over other people. That's what I've seen.
All right. Good caveat there onto what I said. Coming back to my question, if they do get that diet locked in to that point, whether it be 80, 90%, you have a supplement company you've mentioned a couple times, Surthrival. What supplements from your company and beyond would be a good complement to the diet we've been talking about?
Well, I mean, supplements are...
I know it's individual. I want to caveat that.
Very individual. But also what we think of as supplements, I think there's a lot of products out there that are called supplements. I don't really think I like nature-based supplements personally. So that's what I focus on at Surthrival. I think supplements are extremely individual, like you said, and they are, when I think of what I call supplements are, if I could call them medicine, I would, but it's illegal. So I can't call them that. So I can't say, medicinal mushrooms, because that's making a structure function claim to the FDA and the FCC, and that's against the law. Or I would have to be basically beholden to the same rules as pharmaceutical companies. That's challenging. So I think about everybody, just about everybody, if you got your diet perfect, you got your exercise perfect, you're still going to have some stuff that's going to come up, right? Everybody's got different genetics and histories. And, you never know, like, what day as a kid you were out playing and you walked through a freshly sprayed glyphosate patch, or you got exposed to a dose of mercury, or, any name, pick your poison. You got hit with a bad vaccine batch as a baby when they gave you the MMR or something. Any number of things can happen. Everybody's got stuff that's going to come up health-wise, or almost everybody. So even if you get all your stuff perfect, and I say that because some people think they're going to eat and exercise themselves to perfection. And the reality is this is such a temporary ride for, in these bodies and on this planet. It's like, even if you could take it to the maximum, you're not going to live much past 100. And, I know there's people on the planet now, let's say 110 years old, they come from different stock, man, right? It's like, that's a different, they were founded in a time where you didn't need an organic certification because they were born before the chemical applications even began. So they have a whole foundation. The idea that people from our generation and younger are going to be able to live that long is maybe, I hope so, but I mean, I'm kind of skeptical, you know what I mean? So even if you could get everything perfect, it's like you're going to die. So when you're looking at supplements, it's like, hey, what am I going to die from? Because what I'm going to die from is probably different from what you're going to die from. And now that we're in our 40s, we're probably getting a little clearer picture of what it might be. What are your nagging constant things? So your supplements ought to assist you with your particular thing. So that's, it's hard to take supplements and herbs and separate them too much for me, because most of them are what we think of as herbs in my mind. But I think another area that people should focus on, and this has been major focuses at Surthrival for us, has been immunity, because we see pretty widespread immunodeficiency, or has become very common in our generation is immuno oversufficiency, which we call autoimmune problems. So that's that overactive immune system. I love medicinal mushrooms for that, or anything that falls in this category of what we call immunomodulators. I'm not super excited about supplements that stimulate the immune system. I'm excited about supplements that can stimulate or downregulate the immune system based on the user. And that's why medicinal mushrooms are exciting to me. So again, reishi, chaga, lion's mane, all these different medicinal mushrooms do that. And there's a suite of plants that do that as well. That's exciting, because if your immune system's too active and mine's not active enough, we could take the same supplement and both of us could get closer to a regulatory balance. And I think that's a beautiful thing. So I think immune system's an area where people could go above and beyond and look at supplements. I think hormones are the other big one, real big one. And I think peptides are another big one. So this is kind of falling into maybe a little more of like what we would normally call anti-aging. If we were watching like The View right now, or some kind of like daytime TV show, they call it anti-aging. So I'm watching everybody around me, it seems like, go on to peptides, injectable peptides. I'm watching people get on to bioidentical hormone replacement. And I just don't want to go down that road for a suite of reasons. So I'm very interested in supplements that can help do those things. But, have you ever had the opportunity to like watch a guy start taking testosterone and just
No.
steroids, So you're like, okay, it's amazing. You watch a guy, who's kind of a regular guy, and then they start taking testosterone, and they always say the same thing. Well, it's just a little baby dose. It's hormone replacement therapy. But it is, all steroids are testosterone derivatives. So you're taking steroids, it's just this, we have this funny caveat. Well, my levels were low, so this is just bouncing out. So what happens is they start getting jacked and lean and vigorous because they're on steroids, There's no supplement that's going to do that. So you're not going to take, like we sell our pine pollen products. Pine pollen contains testosterone, or a bioidentical form of testosterone that comes from the pine tree, and a bunch of other hormonal substances. But it's not hormone replacement therapy. It's not going to do that. Like, it's not like bodybuilders can just be like, oh, well, I'll just use pine pollen instead of, D-ball or whatever, it's not going to work the same. It's going to be much more subtle. But I'm playing the Gandalf game. I'm not doing the Joe Rogan game. I'm doing the Gandalf game. Like, my long-term goal for aging is to become wizened with time. I want a big, long white beard and long white hair. And I want to look like I stepped out of the Old Testament. I'm not trying, because here's the thing. I think when I look at people, it's like, let's say women who go down the route of a lot of plastic surgery and injections and Botox and all those kind of things. They don't look younger. They just look like this other thing. Does that make sense? It's like they all start to look the same. They all get that same face. Like, it's all plumped up and over fattened, and they wear those big lid wigs on their eyes, and you get all that stuff together. And you're like, you're not a young woman, and you don't look like a regular aging woman. You're like in this other category of this enhanced person. And that's what dudes are doing too, with testosterone and peptides and stuff. So I'm just trying to go a different route. So for me, if somebody's interested in that different route, it's looking at what supplements can keep your testosterone levels, I don't want to say elevated or high, but just in range. And for women, that might look more like looking at estrogen and progesterone, but there are plants that have traditionally been used for this. Again, they'll never be as strong as pharmaceuticals, and you don't really want them to be, because, man, stuff changes a person. But I think that that's another area that's really important. And now that peptides you know what I'm talking about when I'm talking about peptides?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So you got everything from like Ozempic and Wegovy are peptides, to some of these ones that are being used for tissue repair, all these kind of things. I'm a huge fan of colostrum. I think anybody who knows my work knows that. I'm also a big fan of deer antler and elk antler, because when those antlers are growing, just like the colostrum, they're extremely rich in these different peptides. And again, they're not going to be as strong as taking these injectable black market peptides everybody's taking, but they'll work more subtly, but they're very effective. And so I'm looking at how do I reduce my aging process, because one, I want to live a long time, and because two, we're living bombarded in a really toxic environment that prematurely is aging us. And I'm looking at how can I also keep my immune system really functional. So those are the things. I think if your diet's really good and you're getting a lot of color in your diet, you don't necessarily need to be like taking antioxidants. If you're eating a really varied diet, you probably don't need a lot of vitamins. I think D3 is one that is worth looking at if you're not getting optimal sunlight levels. But if you are, then probably not important to really be worrying about that. I think a good, varied, healthy diet can take care of most of our vitamin mineral needs. The things that we want to supplement with more medicinal than they are nutritional, in my opinion. Where I think the usefulness of vitamins, minerals, things like that are for people whose diets are not good. And then it's like, well, yeah, you're missing those things. But there's almost no point in buying and taking those things if you're already getting them in your food, because your food's going to be superior. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And earlier you talked about the people that are living past 100 right now, and they came from a different time, which I totally agree with. You quickly mentioned there toxins in our environment. Putting those two together, what are you doing to protect against the modern environment and the toxins? And then anything, and this could be tied to the supplements, you're doing to purge your body of things you've taken in the past, or things you still take in day to day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a pretty toxic environment we're in. It's really no other way to say it. And no matter what you do, I mean, you can't avoid it. And in fact, this is one of those other areas. So I have friends who spend a lot of their energy trying to avoid all these things, and they end up living almost comical lives because of the efforts that they're going through. To me, I don't know that the juice is worth the squeeze, because it's raining down from the sky, it's in the water, it's in the food, it's in everything, right? It's like we found out about these forever chemicals recently, right? It's like in the last couple of years, and it's like, oh, turns out they're in everything, sorry, everything. Or it's like, you have oily skin, and chemicals like BPA and phthalates are on everything that's plastic. So it could be like, well, I don't drink plastic water, as we like type away on plastic keyboards and use our plastic phones, and we're touching all these plastics all the time. Our whole car It's like, what's your car made out of? Mostly plastic. So you get in there and you seal yourself in this like vinyl environment, and you're touching all of that. It's seeping through your skin. I mean, you don't really want to. Yes, you could go live in the desert of Arizona in a little hut you make yourself, but then you die of isolation. So it's, you got to figure out a good balance for these. The crucial information for your listener, in my opinion, is understanding how things get in and out of your body. And so you got basically 4 ways in and 4 ways out. And if you know that, you can regulate a little bit of this. So toxins are going to get into your body through, you're going to breathe them in, you're going to eat or drink them, or you're going to absorb them through your skin. That's excluding toxicity you take in through your eyes in the form of things that are bad for you psychologically. So let's set that aside. But yeah, you're gonna drink it, eat it, absorb it through your skin, or breathe it. The way stuff's gonna come out of you is kind of the same. You're gonna pee out what you drink, you're gonna poop out what you eat, you're gonna sweat out through your skin, and you're gonna breathe out through your lungs. So you've got 4 kind of ways in and 4 ways out, right? And the way I always teach this in my workshops is through the 4 elements. So I say earth, water, air, fire. So you're going to eat earth, drink water, breathe air, and then your skin takes in fire from the sun to make vitamin D, and it eliminates fire in the form of sweat as heat to push things back out. So if things come out by pooping, peeing, breathing, and sweating, then you can really maximize those. So if your fiber's low, your bowel movements are going to be smaller, lower volume, and they're going to be less bacteria in your intestine to actually do the work inside you to produce all of that stuff that's going to come out. And you're not going to eliminate as many of the toxins from your liver, because your liver needs to basically dump bile into fiber for it to pass through you. Otherwise, you reabsorb a lot of things. So, a good high fiber diet is important. Again, that's just plants in your diet. So you can maximize that. And if you have bowel movement irregularity, it's like putting some focus on that, figuring out how to, we have when we're traveling for the show, we'll sometimes use psyllium husks. You familiar with psyllium husks? They're like,
as a supplement.
Yeah, Metamucil.
Not the actual husk.
Yeah. So it comes from a plantain species, and it's a mucilaginous. Hence, what do they call the supplement that old people take with it? It's got the Metamucil. So the muse is mucilage. So a teaspoon of that in your water once a day bulks your bowel movements significantly. And so if somebody's dealing with irregularity, sometimes when we're traveling, it can be really difficult. Your schedule's way thrown off. We have a joke about a drink called the Metamucil Sunrise. So that's sparkling water, orange juice, Metamucil in a wine glass, stirred up. We sometimes jokingly do that on the road, but that's a great way to create regularity in your body. Being sufficiently hydrated with clean water allows you to Okay, let me go back. Your bowel movements will remove fat-soluble toxins. The reason is because your liver basically produces bile salts. Those contain some of that fat-soluble toxin, and it can be absorbed into that fiber in your gut and passed out. So you can remove fat-soluble toxins that way. Water-soluble toxins you can remove by peeing it out, so your kidneys will filter them, but you need lots of good clean water. So obviously, if you're living off of coffee and Olipop, it's like you're not putting a lot of clean water in. It's going to be more challenging. But if you're drinking a lot of good clean water, you're going to pass a lot of water-soluble toxins out through your urine. Your skin can do both roles. So your skin is unique in that it's sometimes called the third kidney because it has the ability to excrete water-soluble toxins through sweat, but also sweat is oily. So you can also eliminate fat-soluble toxins through your skin as well. That is primarily done in the sauna. So if you're like, well, I'm a cyclist and I sweat really hard. It's like, yeah, but you're sweating under sympathetic nervous system stimulation. So if I do CrossFit, if I go to my gym and we do a really hardcore workout, I'm so stressed out in that workout by the speed and the time and how hard it is. My body's not in the state that it eliminates toxins. Your body eliminates toxins when it's relaxed and it's in a parasympathetic nervous system state. And that's because when your body's stressed, it doesn't care about tomorrow, it cares about right now. So it will see your spinning workout as being chased by a predator, right? That's kind of what it perceives that as. So its focus is, let's get through this intense moment, not, oh, this is a good moment to go through and do some house cleaning. When you get in the sauna, it provokes a parasympathetic nervous system response. So your body starts calming down. Parasympathetic nervous system comes on, body starts processing out metabolic toxins. And when I say fat soluble toxins, I'm talking about things like heavy metals, things like glyphosate, these things that hang out in your body fat or hang out in your bones. So the sauna is a great way to mobilize that stuff into the blood, and then you can excrete it through the skin. And then lastly, probably the most toxic materials coming out of our exhalations, and that's in the form of carbon dioxide. And so when we inhale and exhale, we're going through that respiratory cycle. The exhalation is to your lungs. The exhalation is to your respiratory system what a bowel movement is to your digestive system, right? So when we exhale, we're getting rid of gases. So through this process, as I was talking about, right? So it's like poop, that's earth. Pee, that's water. Sweat, that's fire. And exhalation, that's air. So we need to eat 4 elements a day. So we eat food, that's earth. We drink water, that's water. We breathe oxygen-rich air, that's air. And we take in the light of the sun, that's fire. And then we got to put those 4 things back out as well. If we have too little coming in and not enough going out, or let's say we have too much coming in and not enough going out, we bloat up and plump up and get fat and get swollen. It's the opposite if we have too much going out. You'll see this a lot in like the orthorexic world. So people I keep warning about the extremes around this stuff because I just watched people. I know people who've died from trying to do health food diets, like actually died, particularly at the extreme ends of food restriction. And what's happening is you watch them just shrink and shrink and shrink. There's like not enough coming in to how much is going out. So they're so focused on the detox part that they actually detox to death. So that's a thing that we want to balance these things just right, So we're maintaining our equilibrium, we're maintaining our weight, we're maintaining our complexion, we're maintaining our water levels. But if we do all those things, I think the best way to keep toxins out of your body is essentially to make sure your bowel movements are good, make sure your urine is full and regular. Any opportunity for the sauna is important, maybe 3 times a week. I wouldn't go too much past 4, but 3 times a week maybe. And then, always obviously making sure that you're not getting into one of those breathing states where you're just, you want vigorous breathing and at times extremely vigorous breathing. So I love exercise for that and just actually really purging the blood of gases.
We talked about spring water before, and this ties into what you just said about hydration. If somebody isn't going to go harvest and collect that, what's the next best?
Artesian well water would be the next best. So if you live rurally, like I do, all our water comes out of most houses out here have a private well. And I always used to tell people like, hey, if you don't have that, you might know somebody that does. Like you can just go fill your bottles over at your friend's house who's got a well. But obviously, the challenges. I know them from traveling. It's like, I get in the airport and it's like, what am I going to drink for water in here? And then, I think the other day I paid, I want to say $8 for 650 milliliters of water. Cause I was like, it's in glass. I kind of prefer the glass over the plastic. It's so crazy. It's getting so, they take all your water and then they force you to buy it, and sadly, since that's your blood plasma, I always used to say what a slave state if you have to buy your own blood, but that's the reality we're in now. So, it's very challenging when you're buying water to sort through what's the best thing to do because when you look at water, you have options like spring water, but maybe that spring water is in a plastic bottle and you're like, well, it's good source water, but it's been I don't think you could get any water out of a plastic bottle that's not going to contain plastic. And I'm sure you've seen these stats now. We know like the amount of microplastic the average person's, eating in a week is like about a credit card's worth a week. And that plastic, there is a point, Jesse, for me where you go like, okay, I have to just live in this world. Like, and I don't want to live stressed about this all the time. So there's like an acceptance point for me. It's kind of like if you live in, I don't know, if you live in Nevada, it's like there was a nuclear war that took place in Nevada in the form of testing of nuclear weapons. But there's the number of warheads detonated over there. The world's had 2,000 plus detonations of nuclear weapons now. That's pretty stunning when you think about it. Because you think about what would a nuclear war look like? Probably less than 2,000 warheads. But all those nucleotides are still around. And if you live in a place where they are there, they're just there, man. It's like, what are you going to do? Or, you live in Japan and you have, fallout from 2 atomic bombs, but also from a plant meltdown. It's like this stuff's just all around. So at some level, it doesn't, you want to be careful, but you also don't want to lose your peace over it because you can kill yourself faster with stress than from microplastic. So there's some balance to be had, I think. But the next best water after a well is going to be, if you have to buy it out of a bottle, I think it's good to get water that is sourced from a spring versus water. Like, let's say some of your options like the PepsiCo or Coca-Cola waters. So that'd be like Dasani and Aquafina or any of those smart waters or alkalized waters or all those kind of waters tend to be local tap water. So imagine this, like if you want water from Fiji, so if you want Fiji water, that water has to be brought over from Fiji, and water is non-compressible. So it's already as small as it can get. You can't compress it like you can the foam in your couch or something. So it's got to be brought over at great expense. So if you're a water company, like if you're doing Dasani, it doesn't make sense to ship that water all over the place. What you do is you set up a local plant, you use that local water, reverse osmosis filter it, add minerals back into it because reverse osmosis water is gross. Add stuff back into it, and then you never have to ship the water except from the central plant to those stores. So you can set up these plants all over the place, use the municipal water, and that's it's like club soda, basically, essentially. So that water has been through all this processing, not dissimilar to how you'd make processed food. It's processed water. So the less processed that water is, in my opinion, the better. So that might mean buying the local spring water if you can find one. It's a challenge. A lot of times people buy things in glass and they go like, oh, well, at least it's not plastic. And they don't realize like it went from plastic into that glass. So I'll see this all the time. Like, oh, this olive oil is really nice, comes in this beautiful glass bottle. But when you go to the factory where they're filling it, it's in plastic drums. And then they put it into the glass bottles. You know what I mean? So it's hard. I have eyes on the behind the scenes of a lot of this stuff, and there's no easy answers. I want there to be for everybody listening. But you gotta, the closer you get to your sourcing of everything that you eat, the better. So that's how I ended up at hunting and gathering. It was like, I wanted to get to the source. So I started with the supermarket and I worked my way to health food stores and I worked my way to farmers markets and then I worked my way into the natural environment to like find foods themselves. And now when I don't have those, I'm also, I know my farmer, I know what they're raising, I know the soil there. And that's really gives me a lot of peace of mind. I know where my water is coming from for the 80% of the time. But there's no easy answer. So it's like, what's the best water? I don't know, but I know this. If any water will do if you don't have water. That's a really important thing to remember. I mean, you need to stay hydrated. So I would rather drink, 6 bottles of Aquafina today than to fast off of water and dehydrate myself to death. So you got to drink what you've got to drink. But if you can, you want that water you want to be as close to when that water came out of the ground as possible. And you want it in as non-toxic of a container as you could have it in.
How do you feel about for at-home use, distilled RO, and then adding minerals back in?
Well, I don't think that there's anything, you got to do something. So if you're talking about if you're on a municipal tap system.
Yeah, just for homes to have drinking water that comes out
if you live in a place
of a little nozzle by your sink.
Well, my water comes out of a nozzle by my sink, but it comes from a well. So it just,
Right.
but if you're on a municipal water supply, yeah. And something I think people should know about municipal water too, that they don't often realize. So you've got 4 chemicals to think about. Fluoride's obviously one of them. And you may live in a place that doesn't fluoridate. So that's, occasionally I talk to people, they're like, oh yeah, they've never fluoridated where I live. Which is great because now it's coming out. I mean, I was called a quack. Like thousands of other people were called quacks for saying this, but now it's on the record that fluoride reduces IQ in children. So, and it was Edward Bernays that got fluoride put into water in the first place, and he's the father of propaganda. I mean, this guy was also who got women to smoke cigarettes. This guy was bad news. So you got fluoride, very small molecule. You need extremely good filtration for that. Chlorine, of course, which is bleach, which keeps you from getting, there's a reason when you go to certain countries, you don't want to drink the tap water. The chlorine prevents you getting sick, which is good. But obviously chlorine's an antibiotic in your gut, and that's not good. But also what a lot of people don't realize is that there's a lot of minerals in the municipal water supply that can either build up inside the pipes or damage the pipes. So what they do is they balance out putting phosphoric acid and sodium hydroxide into the water supply. So there's 2 injections that basically keep the pipes from concretizing with all this built up mineral. So if you can picture ever seeing a sink at someone's house where you got built up calcium all around where the nozzles are and stuff, and it starts to concretize on there, that's what's happening in pipes. And so they, you run some phosphoric acid through there and that'll eat that off of the walls of that pipe. And then you run some, something alkaline like sodium hydroxide. So you're maintaining pH basically. So if you wanted to do RO or distillation, RO is also known as mechanical distillation. Basically, you're stripping everything out and now you're down to H2O, which sounds good to most people, except that H2O is not a natural water. There's no H2O pools or springs in nature. There's always other minerals. So your question is obviously like about adding minerals back, because even Dasani knows if they put RO water in a bottle, people don't like it. It tastes bad. And not only does it taste dead and bad, but that water, I always describe it as a hungry water, because when there's no minerals in the water wants to absorb stuff into itself because it's a solvent. So if it's in plastic and it's RO, it's going to be eating that plastic and pulling it into itself. So what they'll do is infuse minerals in there. So if you look at the back of a bottle of Aquafina, you're going to see that they're putting in calcium, they're putting in magnesium, they're putting in sodium, and that's making the water taste a little more good. So I think if somebody's going to do distillation at home, it's a good way to know you're taking all the stuff, you're getting the meds out. You're like, let's say you live in San Francisco and you've got a water supply that's like contaminated with antibiotics and hormones and birth control. And, that's those things in extremely small quantities have profound effects. So yeah, we want that stuff out. So maybe you go totally nuclear and you just distill the water down to nothing. I think rebuilding it's smart. So whether it's a prefab mineral block that some companies produce, this is a little outside my area of expertise. I don't do this, so I'm just riffing here. Maybe you use a good quality sea salt, or maybe a good quality mined salt, like a Himalayan salt or something like that. But something that puts a little bit of electrolytes back in water. Let me give one last kind of point on this. If you took a pure distilled water and you had it in a truly neutral container that didn't leach. So let's say like I fill this up with pure distilled water. I could put an anode and a cathode electrically in there and it will not conduct electricity. Water is not a conductor of electricity. I'll say it again. Water is not a conductor of electricity. But as soon as I add salt in there, now it's a conductor. So people think water conducts because water always has minerals in it. So it's like, yeah, if you get in the bathtub with, an electric appliance, like you drop your radio in there, you're going to get electrocuted because that's not pure H2O. That's got all kinds of minerals in it that are electrolytes. And the electro in electrolytes refers to their electrical conductivity. And so do you want to drink an electrically dead water? Probably not. So putting something like a salt back in that isn't just pure table salt or pure iodized table salt. You want a salt that also has a complement of minerals, which is why I bring up, natural sea salts and such.
How do you feel about alkaline water, hydrogen water, structuring of water. Are you a fan of any of these things that you do or try?
I know a lot of people that are big into that. I have not seen the fruit of it in their life. So, and this is the thing I'll say, Jesse, that this sometimes really irritates people, but it's like I'll see way healthier people, looking people, more robust and more healthy, walking out of Planet Fitness than I see in these circles of people that are doing all these things. It's like the people I know who are doing all these things, and I've been in this world a long time, dude, at a pretty high level. So I'm not saying that like I've been around it a lot, and I know the people who invented the hydrogen water. You know what I mean? Like I know those people who created it. When I'm around those people, I see more vigorous health in people that exercise and don't even think about what they eat than I do in the people who do all of this stuff. Now, if you do all that stuff and you exercise, maybe now you're getting something kind of good here. But I think that what you end up with is a lot of times people who they're taking the energy that should go into exercise and they are continuing to apply that to an area that's already full. So it's like the diet and water world, they've got that pretty much locked, but they keep trying to put more of the energy of their pie chart in that one slice of pie because they don't want to put it in the other area. But how they would get healthier is to put it in the other area. So it's like, if I'm a brainiac, super scientist with an IQ of 240, and my relationships are suffering because I'm emotionally retarded, and my physical body's atrophying because all I do is read, and I have no spiritual connection, but I'm so smart. And you're looking at my life and you're my life coach. Would you be like, you need to put more energy into your studies? I'd be like, no, no, man. You know so much that it's bad for you. You need to put your energy into these other three areas. Remember before I was talking about the four elements. You could kind of use that same model here. So it's like fire, spirituality; air, intellectuality; water, emotionality; earth, physicality. I want to put kind of equal amount. So if I got those four containers and I only have 10 marbles to put in the containers, I kind of want to put an even amount. And I want it to be pretty even. So you see all these characters who are lopsided. So you got the bodybuilder with not a great developed brain, not a great developed heart, not a great developed spiritual life, but all the most incredible body. Or I already talked about the intellectual person, or the emotionally hyper intelligent person, but's really overweight. You see that a lot, right? I see that one a lot. So you could be the spiritual person who it's like, man, if they could just exercise a little bit, I feel like they would be a better container for all that spirit, you know? So for me, I'm really interested in all four of those being really well balanced. And it's really easy to go too far in these things. So yeah. So anyway, to come back around to your question, I think hydrogen water, great, structured water, great, but I haven't seen bang for the buck out of that. I've just never seen it do anything. And when I drink it, it kind of feels a little placebo to me. I don't mean to sound jaded about it. I've been around it 30 years. And so I'm like, is it really doing anything? I don't know. I get way more out of lifting weights, you know?
Well, let's stick with the exercise piece. You've really hammered home the importance of bringing this into a health and wellness routine.
Yeah.
What does that look like for somebody right now who is just doing some basic walking, not lifting weights? How do they bring that in a balanced way? Because there is so many different kinds of exercising, stretching. What does that look like for you, somebody that's embraced this pillar, to bring that into the health and wellness routine?
Okay, well, you brought up walking, which I love that you mentioned that, because that's the most fundamental form of human movement and it's foundational. And I don't think that there's any amount of exercise that you could do that you would be off the hook on needing to walk. And I suspect, and I don't have any science for this, but I suspect that over time we're going to learn that walking has benefits beyond just the slight muscular and cardiovascular benefits. Obviously, wisdom traditions around the world have told us the importance of walking from a meditative and psychological cultivation perspective. So I think most of us know that. It's like you go for a walk, you come back with renewed clarity, purpose. Sometimes it's like you're angry or frustrated or sad. You go for a walk. It's like insights form. So that's really important. But I think actually the rhythm of walking, because humans are a migratory species, and so at least semi-migratory, we're meant to walk long distances. I keep mentioning Jesus, but it's like he walked 30,000 miles in his 3-year ministry. I mean, you look at the Shroud of Turin, if you buy into that, I certainly do. And you look at the physique of this dude, it's like walking. Okay, it's important. Um, I think it's important. Like I said, it's good to develop a flavor appreciation for bitterness. Here's another one. It's really smart to pay attention to old people around you and get to cultivate relationships with older people, because that was obvious in the past, but man, are we ever living in a time that just wants to shuffle old people into memory holes and we forget about them. I really love seeing a couple things: old people that are happy, old people that are in love, and old people that are fit. I just always want to know, like, what do they do? Well, walking is kind of almost a universal one you're going to find in healthy old people. So walking, non-negotiable every day. I think it's important to have a dog for this purpose. If you can tolerate dogs and you can have dogs, you have to walk your dog every day. Well, it's like who's walking who? My dogs are, I feel a deep obligation to walk my dogs that I don't feel for myself. Like I feel like abusive if I don't walk my dogs, but I won't feel that way about myself. So my dogs make me walk. That's really beneficial. So I think, they always say that having dogs or pets can extend your lifespan. And I think that's for a variety of reasons. But one is that you're going to end up walking that dog. So I always say, take the dog of your body, or take the animal of your body for a walk, because you're spiritually, I don't think you're an animal, but your body's an animal, and you need to take that thing for a walk every day that you can. But I think we also need cardiovascular exercise. So this is locomotive exercise. This is really different than strength training. So locomotive. So that's, walking is locomotive, running is locomotive, skipping is locomotive. Man, skipping is like one of the greatest because it's plyometric and it's really fast. I live on a pretty rural road, so sometimes I'll go skip, and you can't believe how fast you go without getting so out of breath as running. Like I was thinking about, like, if you were living in Rome, let's say, and you were like one of those couriers who had to like run 100 miles with a message for the king. Skipping is great because you go really fast, really far. It's way less energy than running. It's way faster than walking. And it's actually really good for your brain because of the type of periodic rhythmicity that it has. Swimming, biking, rowing, any of these, climbing, any of the things that carry your body from one place to another are locomotive. So I think of that. And then the variable is speed, essentially, right? And difficulty of terrain. Those might be your variables. So walking is great. Turning that up to running creates a cardiovascular stimulus. Biking, rowing, like I said, any of these kind of things, but that stuff that's cardiovascular is crucial. And I think that we need like hours and hours a week. Personally, I'm sorry to say that to you guys out there who aren't into it, who are listening, but hours a week, at least 2, but 2 to 5 hours a week. And then strength training, which doesn't have to be weightlifting, can be a variety of things, can be more calisthenic based, could even be yoga type stuff, can even do it sometimes. It's somewhat limited. It could be more functional fitness type exercises. It could be things like step ups and sandbags and things that are more fun. But I think that that's really, really important because we need to carry muscle mass into later years. So we've all seen this too, if you've paid attention. Somebody who's got a very robust body and then they hit a certain age, 65, 70, and all of a sudden the sarcopenia starts and they just start to shed muscle mass. You don't want to be an old person without muscle mass. So you need to be able to, if you want to have a good life and you don't want to break a hip and end up dead, because you break a hip, it's kind of a death sentence for most people. And why do they break a hip? Is because they lose the ability to hold themselves upright and their bones become weak. And that has to do with lack of gravity. So what's so important about strength training is actually increasing gravity, and that causes your body to have to make more robust bones, tendons, ligaments, and muscles. So strength training. You mentioned stretching. I'll call it mobility, but yeah, whether that's stretching, yoga, mobility exercises, whatever it is, something that's keeping your body able to move through its complete range of motion in every joint. It's like, what joint do you want to lose mobility in? It's like, oh, if I gave you, it's like a list of all your joints, it's like hard to pick one. You're like, oh, my neck, my shoulders, like nowhere. I don't want to lose mobility anywhere. So you're gonna, after, I mean, you know how it is. When you're 20, you're not. When you're 30, you're not. When you're 40, you're not. But somewhere around mid 40s, you start really feeling it. And then it's like, oh, I have to actually maintain this. And so that's important to build in. And let's say in mobility, we'll put mobility, but also kind of balance and those kind of things. I think it's really important to work on all of that stuff too. So I think we need a pretty big variety. I'll add one more piece, which is sport. Because it's like recently I had a buddy who's just on me to play pickleball, man. He just wanted to play pickleball. And I just am like, I don't care about things like that, you know? I go play pickleball with him. 2.5 hours goes by so fast. I put in as much work as if I was on, a run. I had a blast. I'm working hand-eye coordination. I'm having to remember rules. I'm juking in a way that I would never do in the weight room, right? So when we play sport, whatever that sport is, it puts cognitive demands on our body that weightlifting doesn't. You can kind of zone out a little bit in the gym, but sport requires presence. So I think that that would be my prescription. It would be walking, cardiovascular exercise, strength training, mobility, and sport I would say are. And so that might look like, well, I'll focus on one each day, or I'll break it up into a kind of, I sort of tend to alternate my strength training and my cardio. I'm somebody who will often do 2 workouts in a day, or a workout and a mobility session. For some people, it's like, hey, which one today feels like I need the most? For other people, it's a very structured routine. And I think it depends on you. Like, you need to be thinking about long term, and I mean decades. So if you pick a routine that you're going to burn out on because it doesn't fit your personality, you're not going decades on it. And there's just no stopping. My mother-in-law is 82, and she's just started working out a couple of years ago. I can't believe watching her get out of a chair now. It's like, wow, Edith, you've changed. Like, you can still improve in your 80s. It's awesome to watch. But it's like, I keep telling her, like, you can't ever stop. The second you stop, it's like kind of over. You have to keep going with this. So this is a lifetime thing. So more important than what's your routine or what's your split is like, how can you make sure that you're going the distance? Because a lot of people want exercise to be this thing where you get in shape and then you can kind of back off of it. It just doesn't work like that. In fact, because you adapt to what you do, you actually need it to constantly be changing and stuff. So actually, let me add one last thing. I mentioned CrossFit, and everyone always makes the joke like, well, how do you know someone does CrossFit? It's because they'll tell you. And it's true. Like, I get the culty dorkiness of it. But what I love about it is that I have a community of people there that I go and I train with. So group classes like that can be awesome. Again, yoga, spinning, Orange Theory, CrossFit, something where you have a community around you that's also doing this, and they're people that expect you to do. The people in my CrossFit gym expect me to do things that my regular friends can't imagine I do. They would never, they'd be like, you did 100 pull-ups in 3 minutes? Like, what are you talking about? That's not possible. And you're like, no, it's not only is it possible, I know people who aren't even in shape that are doing it. It's crazy. So some people who have high expectations of you, because the world's not going to have that. So that can be really beneficial too. And that happens in sport, but it's nice to have that in a gym. And when you're at a gym where everybody's listening to their own music in their own headphones, doing their own routine, never talking to each other, and it's mostly like Instagram famous people and all that stuff that's going on, that doesn't feel like community. So finding something that is really helpful.
All right, Daniel, great place to end it. Really enjoyed the conversation. We're going to link up your social media, your website, your TV show. Thanks a lot.
No problem, Jesse. Thank you.
Now that you're done, you're going to want to stick around here and catch this other incredible episode. You don't want to miss it. I'll see you over there.
We went to Sardinia. The place in Sardinia we were at was actually the epicenter of the first blue zone ever identified. It was not only in Sardinia, it was actually in the same village. What we experienced there was the exact opposite from a food perspective.